This is the first half of a decade-long tale that is currently resolving in a delightful way. Over a decade ago, I came home to find I was being moved out by my wife. We weren't in a great place, but I was blindsided. I was also served with a protection order that stated I could not come home without prior written permission, go through my wife, to see the kids, etc. And it was in effect for 90 days. I was devastated. A relative connected me with a bulldog of a lawyer. This lady was brilliant, and no nonsense. She filed a rebuttal to the protection order, but told me these things take time, and we were unlikely to see a judge before the 90 days were up. She was very clear, and I must follow the court order to the letter, if there was any evidence. Otherwise, I'd be in an uphill battle. It only took one day before my now ex needed me to take the kids. I'd crashed at a friend's house, so I had no place to take them. So, we agreed I'd watch them at home. I waited a few blocks away while waiting for an email. Ex called me, and I reminded her of the details of the order, that I wouldn't come until I had permission. Happened twice more, that I waited down the street within the first week. So, I told her I wouldn't leave where I was staying until I had the email. It was about 20 minutes away. I texted her to remind her. The very next day, she again did an email. We were planning on me picking up the kids to take them to school, since their school was only a few minutes away from my work. However, because I had not received written permission, I ran out of time to drive to pick up the kids and then make it to their school and work. She called, furious that I wasn't there. I reminded her about the permission and that I was out of time. She ended up being very late to work that day. She then went to write me blanket permission to come and go as needed, but my lawyer advised against it. Follow the order. The culmination of this was a few weeks later, when she again forgot to send permission. Her boyfriend was staying over, but didn't have his car with him. They both had to get to work, and that was the day I learned that he was a direct supervisor. Ex had to call a friend from work to pick up the kids and take them to school, and the friend found out. Of course, he got out at their work. Within a week of that, the boyfriend was fired over the relationship, and my ex was suspended by this time. I had my own place, so the kids ended up staying with me most days. I later learned that the protection order was the boyfriend's idea. Ex was quite mad about it, as it turned into evidence that I wasn't a threat to her or the family, and the judge was quite harsh with her over it. When we settled for support and parenting time, she called it intentional and harmful parental alienation. And this is a two-part story that I said at the very start. Starts in malicious compliance, and then was posted in pro-revenge. So you can maybe see where this is going to go with that. And I don't think there was much OP could have really done about this, apart from what they did. And, get a lawyer involved. And the lawyer was saying, just follow everything on that court order to the T, because otherwise, you're just going to get yourself in trouble, which is exactly what OP did. But I do know, with a quick glance over the update, that it does give more information about what happened before all this. So, we're going to go to OP's update to find out what happened next, which says, this is the second part that was removed from pro-revenge. I'll maybe fix it later there. This is the second half of a decade-long tale that is currently resolving in a delightful way. A decade ago, my then wife, now ex-wife, began a relationship with a guy and kicked me out of my house. Her boyfriend was instrumental in blindsiding me and planning how to keep me from my own kids. Ever since I've kinda hated him. I've always been polite and respectful with boyfriend, because he'd become my kid's stepdad. But I swore, if I ever had a chance, I'd get back at him. I figured it would be something petty, but then he gift-wrapped my revenge, and I've been running with it for almost 3 weeks now. My kids are mostly grown now. Sermon University, some in grades 11 to 12. Unikids live with me, whether high school still go back and forth with their mum. I'm also remarried now. My wife and I each have our own vehicles, but my wife owns and insures a minivan for when we're all going somewhere together. Kids are free to use it too, as only one has a car. We only have one set of keys, so I put an AirTag on it. A little transponder that tracks its location. I put it on there in case the keys were lost. About 3 weeks ago, one of my older kids took the van out for the night, but ended up staying in his mum's on the couch around 7 a.m. The next day, another kid asked to use the van. I pinged the AirTag, only to find out it was hours away in an industrial section of another town. I was quite concerned why my kid was out there. I called him up and he was at his mom's, where he'd said he'd be. He had no idea the van was missing. I called the police and gave them the location of the van. Within 20 minutes, they had stopped the van, and the driver said he had permission to use it. You see, it was my ex-wife's boyfriend. This weren't very interested in detaining him, as it would be easier for him just to drive the van back to our town, and we could sort it out here. However, it wasn't my van. nor was he listed on the insurance to drive it, that it be impounded in Canada. We can't press charges, but I was adamant that this was theft, and I wasn't going to let it go. Since the guy was out of town with no ride, the police did end up detaining him, probably because it was easier. I was given info for the yard where the van was impounded since we had the next day off my wife, and I drove out to the yard to pick it up. When we got there, I first checked for damage, since it was sitting a little low, nothing outside. When I checked inside, I found that it was loaded with industrial fasteners and cable. I think seismic mitigation. Turns out, boyfriend used my wife's van to pick up stuff for work. My wife turns on her heels and walks to the office. I had to jog to keep up. She asks, who has access to their van? They have the only set of keys, so my wife is assured, only her or me. At this point, I get where she's going with this. I instruct them that no one has access to their van, but us at 35 with me. So, I gave it to them as a tip. They promised me that no one would get in there, and they actually moved the van into a secured area within the yard. Then we went home without the van. We weren't even home from a long drive. When I got the first text from boyfriend about getting the equipment, I explained that we left the van as there was our expenses. We were not going to pay towing and pounding fees, daily storage. I told him that he'd have to pay for them before I pick up the van. He was super mad and swore, he'll pay me back. I said, no way. Within an hour, I got a call from his boss. They needed the equipment ASAP for a time-sensitive job. I explained that it was impounded, and I won't have time to get it until next week. Now, that has to be paid in advance. Boss swears up and down at me. I calmly explained that I didn't steal a vehicle to transport his stuff. Boss was having none of that. So, I said, I won't tolerate that abuse and hung up, and I blocked him and his company on every platform I'm reachable on, and that was 3 weeks ago. Since then, I've been able to make excuses every single time. Boyfriend tries to arrange picking up the van often, because the kids don't have the van, so I have to drive them. Boss has gone through a few times using other numbers and sent a ton of emails that I ignore, but I did reply and explain that both my wife and I need about 4 hours to do the round trip, and that needs to be paid for ahead of time, and it's added up to 25 a day for secure storage, plus towing and impounding fees, etc. Plus, I wanted to be paid for the fuel. Boyfriend news, as well as our travel. Boyfriend and I agreed on the standard 58 cents per kilometer, and the boss, he transferred us at the total cost of our driving. By now, the van has made one trip, and our car is done too. It came to almost 600. So, on Friday, it finally happened. My wife and I drove out and picked up the van. It was prepaid and ready to be released. I dropped off a dozen beer at the office when I picked up the keys and went to grab the van. However, I wasn't going to transport boss and boyfriend stuff, so I arranged for it to be held at the yard, had the same rate as the vehicle, unloaded it and left. Right before it closed for the weekend, I got a call from boyfriend. Ask him when he can come by with a work truck to get the stuff. I told him, it's still at the impound, almost 2 hours away, and the office opens Monday at 9. There was only silence on the other end, so I hung up. After about 10 seconds through this, I'd been getting vague updates from my ex, who I've got a good relationship with now. She was livid with boyfriend, and was clear with me that any and all consequences were squarely on him. He's kept his job, but is missing the next pay increase, and it's not getting his year-end bonus. Ex said they are way too short-staffed to let him go, but he's in the doghouse at home and at work. No word on criminal charges for taking the van, but Crown handles that, and I'm not suing in civil court. When Opie actually took out the stuff and left it in the impound under the same charges as well. I wasn't expecting that at the end, I gotta be honest. But what do you guys make of this situation? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below.